So originally I was going to make a video going over potential DLC we could see from the devs, plus a few things that modders might be making in the future, and as well as go a little more into detail on some predictions that I think was going to happen for Vanilla Extended. However, I then also discovered a page when looking online, and turns out that they actually have a pretty big roadmap. So instead, I'm going to be going over something that their roadmap doesn't quite cover. Maybe just as a suggestion, but I'd like to hear what you guys think. I'm no modder, so I actually don't know how to do any of this stuff. But in case somebody out there sees this, then hey, there's a few suggestions for what you could do for some mods. So, there we go. What am I going to go over specifically? Well, these 4 storytellers. What do these 4 storytellers have in common? They are just storytellers. Obscure, Obnoxious, Ronald Royal, Winston Waves, and Perry Persistent. All of them are, well, with the exception of Rimworld Royalty, with the exception of Ronald Royal, the other 3 are all storytellers, and actually the Ronald Royal is missing a storyteller, despite it being a DLC. So, anyways, we're going to mainly cover them. Mainly, I thought, because, well, the rest, everybody else got as a storyteller. Recently, Vanilla Expanded Classic was released, so that brought that number from 5 to 4. Technically, we're going with the technical. Anyway, let's go into the next one. So, allow me to explain. And I think I'm safe to do this because, well, if this is posted on, well, I found it on his Patreon page, which, by the way, go check out. He does drop some nice free stuff as a roadmap progress, and this was the most recent one. I feel comfortable in sharing this, and not that I'm not intending to steal anything, but anyways. So, here's what he's got planned out for the next little while, and on that, you kind of know, in the bottom on the left, you notice that there's a handful of storytellers there. And, well, the original one I was going to go with on this did have a Vanilla Expanded Classic on it, but that has since been released, so that's no longer a valid point. But he's got 3 other factions coming to this. 4 if you technically count the Rim Effect one, since I don't actually know if the Yang or Cerberus are factions. They kind of look like they're just expansions onto Rim Effect that are just expanding some things, but yeah, there's not, I guess technically 4 factions, but 3 within the Vanilla Expanded theme. We have three of them coming, and we still have 4 storytellers that have yet to actually make it. And actually, in this one, it doesn't show. Well, you can see it, but Ronald Royal has yet to be added in. So I guess technically that storyteller has yet to be. Let's just move on to the next page quickly. So, within this video, we're going to be going over, that shouldn't say, this was originally part of the predictions video, so my apologies if it says prediction at the top. But, anyways, starting with Ronald Royal, what could he have for a storyteller? Well, he probably won't come as a faction, just to say that first off, since the rest of these are going to be talking about factions, as Royalty DLC already covers that. Now, as you may have saw in the Road Ahead, or in his little Road Ahead block, there was a Psycasters, which mainly draws from Royalty, so that's sort of an expansion on that itself. And I think if you were to combine it with maybe a couple other small things, there could be an expansion for Royalty that could maybe warrant this. But anyways, so all that would need to be done is maybe a couple of tweaks to the existing faction, which honestly could be pretty simple to patch in. Well, it sounds simple to patch. I wouldn't actually know again. Anyways, this storyteller would likely give all colonists a higher expectation, being that from the royalty. So think of it as everybody is constantly, say, a moral priest with +2 a higher expectation, meaning that that if you have a royal who is also a ideological leader and a storyteller like this, and that would be up to 6 expectation points higher, which I don't even know how that's possible. But could edit the system a little bit to make that happen. Rename a couple things and voila, there you go. But in exchange for this effectively mood debuff, which would cause your colonists to break down, it would also give bonuses to sidecasters, which might be in the realms of if they disperse their heat faster, or at least their neural heat faster. They have higher cast tolerance, so they can cast more at once. Take less penalties from psychic events, and one that I didn't throw up there, but maybe decrease cooldowns on your sidecaster abilities. So you could stun, and then maybe a second later you can stun again. Second later, stun again. And with these boosts currently, with the boosts enabled, it would allow you to essentially just chain your sidecaster. Now, this does sound very powerful, but again, this would be sort of most of the things that you'd be able to chain that fast would only be really potent in combat, or it would be something that. But what I'm trying to say is a lot of the things that you chain typically tend to be more combat related, combat focused, and anything else is it already comes with a high cost, and you have to meditate in order to be able to use it more. So I think that's kind of where it would balance out. And another minor thing for colonists that have Psycaster, whenever they get an inspiration and they manage to fulfill it, they could gain some Psycaster energy, a increased mood buff over the normal mood buff over a normal person completing the inspiration, perhaps even a new power if the inspiration if they manage to succeed at the inspiration, well, massively. So for instance, say a crafter was like, okay, I'm going to craft something, it's going to be 2 qualities higher. This could then introduce maybe it's 1 level up from legendary as perfection. And if somebody were to achieve this perfection, they would be able to get a power. So a new start could also be thrown into here. As simple as you have somebody that's already elevated on the royalty, say a praetor, for instance, and everybody else would be freeholders, meaning you have to keep them satisfied. You have to keep them satisfied so it doesn't go into constant mood breaks. He also would do some types of work, but the trade-off is you'd start with somebody that had powers on. Now, somewhat similar to Vanilla Expanded Ancients, you obviously couldn't, in order to be able to code that in, you probably can't make your own custom starts, so that would be a bit of a downside, but just something to throw into as a Ronald royalty themed storyteller, plus a start. So for Obscure Obnoxious, this is probably just something that would never happen. If it were to, it'd probably be on the lines of a chaotic faction that prizes madness, and somewhat similar to how the storyteller can go into complete, utter randomness, maddening randomness. And the next 2 factions, I've actually put a surprising amount of thought into this, a lot more than I thought I was going to, which is hence why it kind of warrants, I thought it warrants, mention the video. So, fun fact, for Winston Waves, it wasn't actually too far off from what I had originally predicted. I'm just noticing there's no music playing in the background. Wonderful. Oh, joy. I don't know why do I do this to myself? There we go. It's just a bit of Terran theme. Anyways, so what would a faction be for Winston Waves? Well, I think there would only really only need 1 faction for this, or you might not even need a faction for it, just a whole new mechanic, another mechanic behind it, where as I say here, factions would be more or less 2 more generic modern-based factions, nothing too special, and well, they'd have, instead of having say more early industrial, they'd have more late industrial based things, so better, maybe modern armor, perhaps Mark 1 exoskeletons, maybe a mix between a marine armor and a war caskets, something along those lines. But the main theme of this would come within the style of raid. They would attempt to use similar wave tactics to the Storyteller, and how they go about it is it's controlled by outposts that they'll set up around your base. And we'll go into detail with what it says in that big blob, but we'll go into detail. The point is that these outposts will be able to upgrade over time to increase the bonuses that they provide to the attackers, which makes it harder to deal with raids. And this raid style would be known as a campaign. So your enemies would go to battle to you to campaign against you. Each outpost would add to the waves, making them harder to deal with. You can destroy these outposts if you manage to send troops out, which would weaken the raids coming in at your base. And in order to defeat the campaign, all you have to do is just take out the command center, which easier said than done, because the command center would also be bolstered by the outposts that are surrounding it. And I'll provide an example of that a little bit later. But upon destroying the command center, if you're able to do that, all other outposts will become abandoned or manned by maybe a single colonist at most, and you could go to them in order to claim all the resources that is on that land or in that outpost. So here's a little brief of some outposts that I happen to come out with. Obviously, you have the command center. Head of the campaign, you destroy it in order to end the campaign. Artillery outposts, which adds artillery support, destroy it to stop artillery support from happening. And it would essentially work very similar to the artillery outpost added in by vanilla expanded outposts. Except your enemies can use it for themselves. Stockpile outposts, food and supplies for soldiers. Destroy this in order to increase time between raids, because obviously, if you have a well-stocked army, they're probably going to be able to go at you to attack you a lot faster. Medical outposts is heal the wounded. Again, you also destroy this to increase the time between raids, and there's a chance that you might even encounter people that have been wounded and managed to be carried off the map. Or they've happened to they managed to walk off the map. Repair outpost fixes vehicles and damaged equipment, destroyed to increase time between raids. This one would require vanilla vehicles expanded to eventually be released, or a vehicle mod to be released in order to patch that in. I say vanilla vehicles expanded because I believe they are working on that, or they're going to be tacking on their own mod onto a vehicle mod. So that's why I say it. Anyways, power suit outpost. Soldiers will come with power suits and war caskets more often and destroyed to reduce the chance. There's obviously going to be a bit of a baseline chance for if their faction can use power suits, they'll have power suits there. If their factions can use war caskets, they'll have war caskets there. But this dude, it'll never be zero, but destroying these outposts will decrease the chance of them being able to field them. Advanced manufacture outposts. Soldiers will come with space or tech weapons more often, destroyed to reduce the chance. So this one, I guess for more primitive species, maybe they would come in with industrial level power. So say Neolithic and Neolithic and medieval, if they have an advanced manufacturer's outpost, they have a chance to come with more late industrial based weaponry. But if you're already in the industrial faction and you're more along the lines of already using those weapons, then they have a higher chance to come in with spacer tech. As for, say, an Empire campaign, they kind of already have the best tech, so maybe they have a better chance of coming in with really souped up persona weapons. I'm not quite sure. I didn't quite get to that point. But Walker outposts. War walkers will be added to large attacks, destroyed to eliminate war walkers in large attacks. So they are, based on the roadmap that we saw, they do have a war walker expanded mod coming, or it's in the they got that on the books. They probably haven't started working on it yet, but it's probably something that's going to eventually come. So this would just add the ability for war walkers to be in campaigns, depending on how strong they are. When I think of a War Walker, I think of the machines that are based on the scrap that's already in game. I think of this tanky, super powerful vehicle, essentially what would be sort of the shock troopers that they would deploy. The equivalent of shock troopers on the battle line. They deploy a squad or two of the. Well, actually, no. I'd say, well, maybe battlefield commandos or something along those lines, where they deploy a couple of these or a squad of these, and they're essentially meant to turn the tide, win the battle, that sort of stuff. To incorporate vanilla expanded mechanoids, there could be a mechanoid beacon, which would allow mechanoids to attack alongside, or if it happens to be, I haven't really thought this through for the mechanoid and the insectoid, but I suppose for them they can have their own unique, flavor of some of the previously mentioned. Instead of command centers, it could be command ship for mechanoids, and for insectoids, it could be main hive or primary hive, something along those lines. Anyways, go on to the mechanoid and insectoid beacons. Just allow insectoids and mechanoids to attack alongside whoever is currently campaigning. Obviously, maybe Neotholic might not be able to use mechanoids, and perhaps spacers think themselves above using insectoids, but there's something there. And security outpost, which is one of the only defending ones that I thought of at the time. And it adds more defensive turrets to outposts and destroy it to weaken static defenses. Oh, I also just thought of another mod they could implement. Maybe I might make a video on that later, going over that the idea video. But anyways, these outposts, with the exception of the command center, can upgrade over time, which increases their respective functions for happening. From increasing the numbers that they'll add, to reducing time between attacks, to increasing the gear level that they come in, etc., etc. Some outposts can pop up multiple times. Again, some exceptions, the command center probably wouldn't pop up multiple times. Mechanoid beacon, you wouldn't really need a second one on the battlefield. Same with insectoid. Warwalker might only have a couple of them appearing at once, but essentially it makes it more difficult to handle. And obviously, if you happen to let too many outposts get built up or destroyed, if you happen to have too many of these attacking outposts around the area, if they're too high level, it can result within the complete annihilation of your base. So this would obviously be a war method that would only trigger later on into the game. I'd say in mid to late game would be a good time that you may start seeing them, with some of the late game, with some of the end game campaigns being just absolutely massive. And when I think of this, I just picture a huge battle, essentially. It just constantly being attacked in pretty quick successions. Obviously, similar to Winston Waves, you might be able to customize the time between these attacks, and maybe what their starting value is. But overall, I actually think this would probably be a very difficult thing to program into the game. I'm not saying it'd be easy, but honestly, with vanilla outposts, given that we have vanilla outposts, we have vanilla expanded mechanoids. They are going to eventually be releasing a map layout, which I believe, from the looks of it, it's going to change up how enemy bases are laid out. And obviously, with Winston Waves, the storyteller himself, I think that it'd be hard, but I think it could be possible. Might be possible. And on to our last one is Perry Persistent. And this is the one storyteller that has gone the longest without having a faction tag to him. And it's also one that I spent the most amount of time. So Winston Waves, I did spend quite a bit of time going through some of this, but this was one that I spent a lot of time just thinking about it, going, how would you go about this? I actually had a couple different rewrites for how I would see Perry Persistent as a faction come to the game. So first off, the faction would fall along the lines of a mid-industrial faction, sort of what you would see out of the Industrial Revolution. I guess maybe late Industrial Revolution, pre-World War. Let's go with that. Something along those lines. Sort of with a lot of the Men in Black from the game, not the movies, style out. Well, I guess I'm not sure what I was thinking of when I said that, but anyways, very professional. And the inner city, they would often use non-lethal weapons, quick draw, and maybe a couple of the other vanilla weapons, expanded base weapons. So the first faction to be added in would be the investigators. They're always trying to catch someone. They're always going on investigations. This would be a new type of quest, and effectively it'd be similar to the relics and how that quest line was implemented. Maybe you might not need as many in order to get to the bottom of an investigation, or maybe you might need more, but it would follow somewhat along that, where you're going to these places, maybe you're checking out ruins, you're collecting intel for these quests, all of it leading up to the big payday, where you say perhaps they discover, all right, we know that this massive drug smuggling operation is coming out of this base. Can you go destroy it, please? And it could end up targeting it. And if you were to combine the map layout, I guess the base layout mod that they have coming out, you could get some pretty interesting results from it. And a lot of this final reward would be in items, maybe relationship gains, colonists, and a new type of, I guess, a sort of pseudo currency for the investigators, which would be a sort of an IOU. I don't really have a good name for that, but these IOUs could only be exchanged with the investigators, since they're the one that's doing these, but they can be put to use to gain a lot of rewards that are a lot of different rewards that could be offered from these investigations. Plus, maybe you can ask them to give you some Archotech gear, or as maybe what they might call contraband. You may be able to convince them to give you some of that stuff. In addition, you could also use it to call an extra muscle against on raiding, acquire questionably obtained contraband that somehow got lost mid-transit, etc., etc. I just went through that a little bit. So these would be a faction that would be primarily going up against pirates. They might be at war with some more savage or more aggressive factions. Like, how do I explain it? Sort of like how the tribals are. In base game, there are two different tribals, but at least I'm pretty sure there's two different tribals. You have sort of the gentle tribals, and you have the more fierce, the more aggressive tribals. Maybe they might be at war with that more aggressive strain. They'd always be at peace with the other guys, though. And on the flip side, if there were a friendly faction joining to the fray, there'd have to be a hostile one. Well, there doesn't always have to be, but this one there would be. And it'd be along the lines of a gangster outlaws style. They'd be somewhat similar to the investigators, except they'd have more ruffian-type gear, so instead of the trench coats and ties, maybe they have more like sleeveless shirts, perhaps more rugged, ragged-down attire, that sort of stuff. They'd also obviously have a wider range of arms and armor, which would primarily include the makeshift weapons. And maybe they could also see a little expansion to the makeshift weapons, where perhaps I see Molotov cocktails as being more of a makeshift weapon, but perhaps it could go hand a couple different new grenade types, that maybe a handmade shrapnel grenades, or handmade grenades, perhaps a couple of launchers as well, be like rocket launchers, obviously. That would be makeshift, but it could see a little expansion to that, which would be nice. The main thing of the gangsters is they'd have a lot of smuggle type missions where they would send you items and you're in charge with smuggling them and trying to get them to another location. So essentially just moving illegal contraband from one place to another, because maybe they can't drop the pods there, as it would get the attention of the investigators or some other friend or some other rival faction of theirs and maybe draw them in. And effectively, you'd have to move it from your settlement to there. And the kicker would be is that you could be attacked by people who consider you allies as well as enemies. So, for instance, if you happen to have a caravan that's going out to smuggle items, which it would be if you just have them go into, well, if you have the items on your caravan, it would be your caravan would then be renamed to a smuggler's caravan, and effectively you'd be traveling up the road, and perhaps maybe say the Empire would jump in like, oh no, we don't like your smuggling ring has come to an end, or that sounded a lot better in my head. Anyways, this wouldn't harm your relation with it wouldn't harm the relations with the faction unless they happen to wipe the caravan, in which case there maybe is a 25% chance that they go, oh wait, you were smuggling these? Well, we're going to have a relation harm with you. But if you happen to defeat the caravan or defeat the attackers and they flee off, you wouldn't take a relations hit because you're smuggling this. You're smugglers essentially. So if and of course you deliver the items to the smuggling place, they might give you an elevated reward on what you had. So for instance, if say they chalked you up with delivering a bunch of steel to a drop off point on the map, they would then drop pod in some plasteel to your base. Or you could pick up some plasteel from there and then just carry it back as if it were legal contraband. Gangsters can be as to fit a bit of the pirate theme. Could be bribed to make attacks on your behalf, raiding known quest spots on the map and bringing back a portion of the loot, and they'd of course take off a slice as a finder's fee, but they would try to bring it back and sort of introduce a way that, hey, maybe you don't have as strong enough of you're just trying to get started up, or perhaps you can't afford to go after this very valuable item that's on the map. So you're going to send them over there. They will. If you're only sending them after one, you can't send them after only one item. But if there's multiple things on the map that have their interest, they might take a slice of that for themselves. This wouldn't be really effective against most item stashes. This one I had in mind as sort of maybe the mechanoid drop beacons, where they drop a bunch of supplies. Could perhaps have from say you want them to go raid. I'm losing my tangent here. I'm losing track of what I'm trying to say. But yeah, that would be the gangster faction there. What do you think about these? Comment down below. I'd like to hear. Start a bit of conversation. Do you like this sort of style of, I go through a few suggestions of what they could do for mods. You maybe want to hear more from me. Let me know down in the comments. So thank you for watching. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next one. Take it easy.